Hi, I'm Brian, and I'm the Theoretical Gamer. Game balance. We've all talked about it. It's something that's come up in every gaming table. Like, is this game balanced? Is this game unbalanced? Is this character class broken? Is this race too powerful? Is this race too weak to hang with the big dogs? As I've gotten older, I have become increasingly distrustful of the concept of game balance. Let me explain. I am going to start off by pimping a web comic that I read called Games People Play by a guy named Israel Reyes. Now, it doesn't really have a story or any artwork worth mentioning or any characters. It's really just Israel Reyes, bitch platform, and he pretty much admits this. He he sits, he has fun, he plays gaming, and then all the complaints that he has, he sits down and puts in his strip. And I won't recommend it for the writing or the art, but I would recommend it for the insight. He does tend to be fairly insightful about the various flaws of various games. And recently, he did a couple of strips lambasting the newest RPG media darling, flavor du jour, Numenera. Now, I love Numenera just from what I've looked at it, and it looks like an excellent game. And I've been thinking about running it soon, and I've even put out a few feelers for recruitment, and I have a tentative invite to play in someone else's game, and I'm looking to have a good time. But in the comic strip Games People Play, he points out that it is very, very easy to create an optimized character that dominates, and it's very, very easy for a less system-savvy person to create a character that is relatively weak. And I have no problems with this. He points out that an experienced game designer like Monty Cook should, by definition, be aware of these things, and he should make a game that avoids this problem. I'm of the opposite opinion. I like a game that allows you to create a less optimized character. I mean, allow me to say, there's like one of the problems they've had that has been mentioned a lot is in D&D, what they call the linear fighter quadratic wizard problem, which is basically the fighter starts off, kind of weak, and he gets more and more powerful as things go along. But whereas the wizard starts off as like a pussy who can be killed by a common house cat, and eventually by level 20 becomes the Lord thy God, right? And I remember I used to call that long-term game balance. You went in playing a wizard knowing he would suck, and that everyone in the party else knew he would suck, but they would protect him, and they'd put him at the back, and they'd keep him away from harm, because he was an investment. They knew that someday he'd be like calling down meteor strikes on cities that pissed him off. And that was cool. You went in knowing this. Okay, back in the day, I used to play Champions. It was a long time ago. It was late 80s, early 90s. I was still in the Navy, and me and some of my buddies would get together at a friend's house, and we would play Champions. And I think it was even before it became genericized into the hero system. But, and it is a point-buy system. You basically sit down and you buy your character. And I loved it. I still love it. I love the idea that Champions is one of those games where you can completely customize your character. If you can, it's detailed enough that if you think of a character concept and you're system savvy enough, you can find a way to make that character in Champions. It's now my current favorite superhero game is Bash, which to me has all the strengths of Champions, but it simplifies it. Champions was and is extremely complex, very intricate, very, very, very crunchy. More than a lot of people care for. But we had one guy in our group who we jokingly referred to as the rules rapist. It was the late 80s, early 90s. Political correctness had not been invented yet. And what would happen is we would all make up our characters, and we would hand them to this one guy who had mastered the rules of character generation. And he would, quote unquote, audit the character. He would be like, so I gave him a character once. It was a 100-point character. And he was like, okay, well, this can go in a multi-power, and this can go here, and I can move these points around here. And he would ask me questions. Is this important to you? Do you want him to have this and this and this? And I would be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And then he'd hand the paper back, and he'd say, you have 60 more points to spend. Well, that kind of... First of all, he was brilliant, and we loved it. And we loved the fact that he was cool enough to share his expertise with the group. He was a team player. But if you look at game balance, you could have two people make the exact same character, but because one is better at optimization, he would have a lot more points to spend on other stuff. So, no such thing as game balance. Right? And even the creators of Champions and the hero system kind of admitted that. I seem to have a recollection in one of the books where they even devoted a page to showing off how the system can be horribly abused. And I think like one of the sample characters was they're like, you could buy a merit or something that let you own a certain amount of land if you wanted your character to have a headquarters. And they basically did that and added multipliers and said, if you were to put all your points into this, you could have a character who owned the universe, the known universe. And they called that character the Landlord. And like you had characters that could blow up planets. You had characters, they basically said, yes, this is an example of how the character creation system can be abused if you decide to like completely attempt to break it. It's like, so they pretty much came to admit that the system was breakable. You just at some point you have to, and some powers, and so not, so a lot of the powers and a lot of the things that you could buy, they actually put little symbols next to them that said, check with your game master, he might not allow this in his game. Which, if you go back to one of my earlier videos, one of my early ones that very few people have seen, not many hits, I came up with the rather whimsical concept of the God Monster, like a kind of a challenge to anyone designing a game to deliberately put a completely game-breaking, unbalanced character concept into the game for player characters to play, called the God Monster. And basically for the purpose that if you wanted to run a game with any semblance of balance, that the game master would have to step in and house rule the God Monster out of his game. It was kind of a roundabout, ironic challenge to game masters to actually, because there are some game masters that if you basically come up and say, find a broken rule and say, you have to allow me to do this, it's in the rules, and the game master will be like, okay, if it's in the rules, I guess I'll have to allow you to completely break my game. It was kind of a challenge for game masters to step up and actually take control of their game, and to actually have the stones to kind of shout this guy down and say, no, you can't. You're breaking my game. And, it's not in a, hi, I'm in charge, wave my scepter, put on my Viking hat, I'm, because not in a horrible, power-mad GM kind of way, as in, I'm willing to take steps to have the campaign I want. I'm willing to, so yeah, it's like, and I've gotten a little off topic. Let me get back to one of my other, like I said, I've said this is a guilty pleasure game of mine. Rifts, and really just the entire Palladium universe. You can have, in Rifts, you can have one person playing like the Cosmo Knight or something, I think it's called, or a dragon hatchling, or a godling. Yeah, there's a supplement, Pantheons of the Megaverse, which allows you to play a young god who really is exactly what he sounds like. Has this basically colossus striding the earth power level. But then in the core book, you can also have like the rogue scholar, who has no real powers. He's just knowledgeable about a lot of stuff. Palladium and Rifts especially creates a world where if you really want to play the weak character whose job is to kind of, be the everyman of the group and kind of just not be that kind of god. See, it's a wide enough, open enough system where you can have characters of wildly disparate power levels. And if you're a game master and you say, well, okay, let's have a mixed bag of characters and I'll figure out a way to make it work. You can do that. If you want to say, okay, I'm the game master and I'm going to have a godling level campaign where you all play these massively powerful characters, you can do that. You can flat out say, okay, I want a character where you're all basically human and none of you. I mean, you might be a wizard, but you're not intrinsically godlike. You're not. Your skin isn't bulletproof unless you specifically cast a spell or wear armor, something like that. The game is not balanced. Your campaign can be. Right? I like the idea that you can create the weak character if you are so inclined, if you really want to. You can create the character who is, because some people are just uncomfortable. They like playing regular Joes. They don't want to play the godlings. Numenera, it's not totally balanced. You can have like a tough nano who rides the lightning, who has all these fantastic powers and can eventually like rip holes in the universe and fire electric death at people. Or you can also play a charming Jack who entertains, who has like maybe some minor magic but is just a lot of social skills. I'm going to mention something about game balance that I think I initially heard someone talk about Rifts. It was one of those little, like, puerile little arguments that you hear people talking about on the forums and stuff. And this one guy was saying, like, it was was going on and on about how the tech guy was better than the wizard guy because he had more his guns did more damage than the wizard's spells, and his armor was his armor was greater, and blah blah blah, and everyone just kind of rolled their eyes at this guy because he was stupid, because he utilized what I call empty white room game balance. The idea is, the definition, I've heard a lot of people will use their definition of game balance is a 50% chance of surviving a combat in an empty white room. And because the guy sat down and he's like, well, I tested it, and what he did was he basically made up a character who was like a guy with cybernetics and weapons and all the high-tech stuff he could do from Rifts. And the other one was like the Rifts line walker, who was like the consummate mage and all this stuff. He says, okay, they're equal levels. And then I sat down and I rolled dice, and my tech guy consistently won. And leaving out the fact that the tech guy, if he ran out of ammo, he was out of ammo. If his armor got chipped away, it was gone until he could find and buy some new armor. Whereas the wizard, his magical spell energy would replenish itself, so he could easily do guerrilla tactics. He had spells that could affect the environment. He could be clever. And in addition to which, even out of combat, he had lots of spells that were not combat related, which would help him in a lot of other areas. So yeah, if you're playing Numenera, you might have one guy who can rip holes in the universe, but your charming Jack who entertains is invaluable every time you're talking to someone, every time you have any kind of social interaction, right? Different strengths. The original old school D&D were, from an empty white room perspective, were not equal, but everyone had their areas. the thief could check for traps, and he could sneak around, and he could hide, and he was very, very good in an exploratory sense. The fighter was very good in a combat sense. The wizard, well, started off as a pussy. You could do like one cool thing a day, and eventually turned into this all-purpose god, which, the cleric could heal. He could do support stuff, and it was set up to be that everyone fulfilled their role in the party, right? Interesting idea. One of my other favorite games from way back, from the early 90s, is a game called Over the Edge. You can consider this a mini review of this game because the setting is this weird thing. It takes place in the modern day world, and by modern day it has a kind of late 80s, early 90s feel because that's when it was written. And it's set on this weird Mediterranean island that no one's ever heard of, which is like a concentration of every weirdness in the universe comes out there, and it's kind of out in the open there. Weirdness doesn't faze people there. That's just the concept. So you would have psychics and people who with weird powers, and you would have aliens and people from other dimensions, and these things apparently exist in the rest of the world. It's just more out in the open there, and it's just this weird conspiracy, like William S. Burroughs type world. Very, very surreal, very bizarre. The setting, most of the setting stuff in the book is from the creator's campaign that they just wrote down, and they encourage you to make your own. But what I like about the Over the Edge is the setting. It is literally about as rules light as you can possibly get and still have a viable system. You don't have any basic stats. You choose traits which you define yourself. Like I said, the average person has 2 dice to do anything, right? Unless you have a trait that makes you better at it. So if you say, okay, my central trait is that I'm an ex-Special Forces soldier, and it's my superior trait, so it's at 4 dice. You then get 4 dice to do anything that an ex-Special Forces soldier could reasonably be expected to know how to do. It's very simple, but it requires a lot of game master decision making and a lot of game master ability to say, no, that's too out there, I'm going to say no. And if you want, I can go more into the system and give you more details of it, but the idea is, I created a character once, and I played a game once, and everyone was playing like, oh, my character is half angel, half demon, and now my character is, they had all these cool powers. And my character's superior trait, which is a lot more useful than you'd think in a game of conspiracies and deceptions, was that it was defined as that he was a really nice guy that people naturally liked. And he had 4 dice in that. And he had lots of friends, and everyone liked him, and people would, go out of their way to help him. And that was just kind of was he good at combat? He was okay. Did he have any weird powers? No. But he was the nice guy that everyone liked, which turned out to be pretty damn useful. Right? I've kind of gotten very wary of the idea of game balance. If you have a point-buy system, to me, the purpose of this point-buy character creation system is not to create this mythical ideal of the perfectly balanced character. It's to make sure that a starting character doesn't start with all the things. It's to make sure that, that you have to make decisions. What's important? I leave this out so I can boost this. It helps you figure out what's important to your character and what's not. Whereas, but at the end of it, there's never going to be perfect balance, but there's going to be people who are better at some things and they suck at others. I think that 4th edition tried to create an artificial balance to a very great degree, and I think that the characters lost a lot of their uniqueness because of it. Like the rogue and the wizard, all their abilities were combat based because everyone had to be able to hold their own in combat, right? Which, but all in all, anyways, that was my little rant on game balance. Done. Now, a side note, I've got a little project that I've been working on. It's something coming up. One of the things I liked was, I'm going to say the dirty word. I'm going to say Dawn Forged Cast. One of the things that he did that I thought was kind of cool was that he did like read alouds of various novels and books that he liked. And I liked the idea of doing that. I did a bit of a Google search on it to find out the legality of that because I wasn't sure. And I think the general consensus is that you can, because it's considered fair use, it's considered a performance. But as long as but I'm going to cover my butt. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a read aloud. I think I have a good speaking voice. I think I can do it. But the idea is, it's going to be. So I've already started doing some recording. I'm getting close to halfway through the book. I want to have it, I want to have a lot of it ready before I even start posting because I know I have a tendency to flake out. So I want to make sure that I have it ready before I start sharing it. And I don't want to give away what I'm reading yet, but it's nothing deep. It's actually fairly light and fun, but it's a book that I've liked for a long time. It's kind of serious and kind of goofy. And I think you'll like it a lot. I'm going to be posting it chapter by chapter, and fair warning, it's one of those books where the chapters are kind of unevenly dispersed. Some are very long, some are extremely short. And so you'll be like listening and be like, was that it? That was only like 2 minutes. Yeah. Some of the chapters are very, very short. So, just a project that I'm working on, and I think you'll like it. Something to look forward to. Anyways, this is Theoretical Gamer out. Talk to you later.